The silverware arrangements at royal tables followed patterns established during the reign of Queen Victoria, when the expanding British Empire necessitated increasingly sophisticated diplomatic protocols. Each piece of cutlery served multiple purposes, functioning both as dining implement and communication device. The positioning, usage, and manipulation of silverware allowed royal family members to convey complex messages without disrupting the flow of conversation or alerting guests to the underlying communications taking place. Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, had become legendary among palace staff for his mastery of silverware communication. During a particularly tense dinner with Soviet officials in 1975, he had managed to convey warnings, suggestions, and tactical adjustments to British diplomats present at the meal using nothing more than the strategic placement of his soup spoon and fish fork. The resulting conversation had successfully avoided several potential diplomatic pitfalls while advancing British interests in ways that would have been impossible through direct verbal communication. The soup spoon held special significance in royal dining protocol. When placed parallel to the bowl's edge, it indicated satisfaction with the current topic of conversation. When positioned at an angle, it suggested the need for a subject change. When left in the bowl after finishing, it signaled strong disagreement with something that had been said. When placed on the saucer beneath the bowl, it meant the royal family member wished to return to a previously discussed topic. The complexity of these signals required extensive training for palace staff members who needed to interpret and respond to royal communications during formal dinners. Chief butler Harold Pemberton had dedicated 43 years to perfecting his understanding of royal silverware protocols. His ability to read the Queen's intentions through her cutlery usage had prevented numerous social embarrassments and diplomatic missteps throughout his career. During state dinners, multiple royal family members might be communicating simultaneously through their silverware arrangements. The Prince of Wales had developed his own variations on traditional protocols, adding subtle innovations that reflected his personal diplomatic style. Princess Anne employed particularly direct silverware communications, earning respect from international guests who appreciated her straightforward approach even when they remained unaware of the underlying communication system. The historical development of silverware communication could be traced through centuries of royal dining customs. Henry VIII had employed crude versions of cutlery signaling during his diplomatic banquets, though these early systems lacked the sophistication of modern royal protocols. Elizabeth I had refined these practices considerably, understanding that her survival as a female monarch in a dangerous political environment required every possible communication advantage. The Georgian and Victorian eras had seen tremendous expansion in royal silverware protocols, coinciding with Britain's growing global influence. As the empire expanded, the royal family found themselves hosting increasingly diverse groups of international guests, many of whom spoke different languages and operated under different cultural assumptions. The silverware communication system provided a universal language that could bridge these differences while protecting sensitive information from those who lacked proper clearance to receive it. Queen Victoria herself had been instrumental in codifying many of the silverware protocols still in use today. Her attention to detail and insistence on proper procedure had created a comprehensive system that could handle virtually any diplomatic situation. Her influence extended beyond British shores, as other European royal families adopted similar practices to facilitate their own international relationships. The training of young royals in silverware communication began at an early age. Prince William and Prince Harry had learned these protocols alongside traditional dining etiquette, understanding that their future roles would require mastery of both visible and invisible aspects of royal dining customs. The Duchess of Cambridge had undergone intensive training in these protocols following her engagement to Prince William, demonstrating remarkable aptitude for the subtle communications required at royal gatherings. International guests sometimes noticed unusual patterns in royal silverware usage but typically attributed these observations to British eccentricity rather than systematic communication. This misunderstanding provided additional security for the protocol system, allowing it to operate effectively even under intense public scrutiny. The wineglass positioning system operated in conjunction with silverware protocols, creating layered communications that could convey highly complex information. When the Queen moved her wineglass to the right side of her place setting, it indicated approval of proposals being discussed. Movement to the left suggested the need for further consideration. Placement at the top of the setting meant she required private consultation with advisors before proceeding. The bread plate held its own significance within royal communication protocols. Pushing it slightly forward indicated eagerness to move conversations toward conclusion. Pulling it closer suggested desire to explore topics in greater depth. Leaving bread untouched could signal displeasure, while breaking bread into specific patterns conveyed different levels of agreement or disagreement with ongoing discussions. Foreign ministers and heads of state often remarked on the exceptional smoothness of royal dining experiences, praising the Queen's ability to guide conversations through potentially difficult topics without apparent effort. They remained unaware that this skill resulted from decades of practice in wordless communication techniques that allowed her to direct every aspect of the dining experience while appearing to focus entirely on her guests. The napkin placement system added another layer to royal dining communications. When folded and placed to the left of the plate, it indicated satisfaction with the meal's progress. When draped over the chair back, it suggested the need for a brief intermission. When left on the lap throughout the meal, it meant the royal family member wished to continue current conversations indefinitely. Palace staff members underwent years of training to recognize and interpret these various communication systems. New employees often required months of observation before they could reliably read royal intentions through dining behaviors. Senior staff members served as mentors, passing down knowledge that existed nowhere in written form and could only be learned through direct experience and careful instruction. The psychological impact of these wordless communications extended beyond their practical applications. International guests subconsciously sensed the presence of underlying systems and structures, contributing to their impression of royal sophistication and competence. This perception enhanced the monarchy's diplomatic effectiveness while reinforcing Britain's international prestige. The cutlery communication system proved particularly valuable during multilingual dinners where translation delays might disrupt conversational flow. Royal family members could provide real-time guidance to British diplomats and staff members without alerting non-English speaking guests to the communications taking place. This capability had proven invaluable during numerous international negotiations where timing and subtlety determined success or failure. Princess Margaret had been especially creative in her use of silverware communications, developing personal variations that reflected her artistic temperament while maintaining adherence to established protocols. Her innovations had influenced other royal family members and contributed to the ongoing evolution of the communication system. The modernization of royal dining practices had required careful adaptation of traditional silverware protocols to accommodate contemporary needs. Television coverage of state dinners necessitated more subtle signals that would not be detected by cameras, while security concerns required additional layers of communication that could operate under heightened surveillance conditions. The integration of silverware and wine glass communications allowed for sophisticated conversations between royal family members that could occur simultaneously with public discussions involving international guests. This dual-layer communication system enabled the monarchy to maintain unified approaches to complex diplomatic situations while presenting seamless hospitality to their visitors. The effectiveness of these communication systems contributed significantly to the monarchy's reputation for diplomatic excellence, though the general public remained unaware of the sophisticated infrastructure that supported these achievements. The wordless communications represented one of the royal family's most valuable secret assets in their ongoing efforts to serve British interests on the international stage. The royal menu selection process involved far more than simple culinary preferences, serving as another sophisticated communication channel that influenced diplomatic outcomes while remaining invisible to public observation. Each course, ingredient choice, and presentation style carried specific meanings within the royal protocol system, allowing the monarchy to convey complex messages about international relationships, political positions, and future intentions through seemingly innocent dining decisions. Dame Margaret Hartwell, the royal head chef for over 25 years, possessed encyclopedic knowledge of the diplomatic implications underlying royal menu selections. Her understanding of food symbolism across different cultures enabled her to create meals that supported British diplomatic objectives while honoring the traditions of visiting dignitaries. The careful orchestration of these culinary communications required months of preparation and extensive consultation with Foreign Office officials. The selection of British ingredients for state dinners carried powerful patriotic messages that reinforced national identity while demonstrating the quality of domestic agricultural production. When the Queen chose to serve Scottish salmon, Welsh lamb, or English beef, she was simultaneously supporting British farmers and sending subtle messages about the unity and prosperity of the United Kingdom. International guests recognized these choices as expressions of national pride, even when they remained unaware of the deeper communication systems at work. The wine pairing process represented one of the most complex aspects of royal dining communication. The royal sommelier, working closely with diplomatic advisors, selected wines that reflected Britain's relationship with each guest's home country. French wines might be chosen to honor historical alliances, while selections from Commonwealth nations demonstrated ongoing relationships within the former empire. The absence of wines from particular regions could signal diplomatic tensions or disagreements without requiring direct confrontation. The timing of course presentations followed protocols that had evolved over centuries to accommodate the specific requirements of diplomatic dining. The interval between courses provided opportunities for private consultations between royal family members and their advisors, allowing real-time adjustments to be made based on the progress of dinner conversations. These strategic pauses enabled the monarchy to respond dynamically to developing situations while maintaining the appearance of unhurried hospitality. Queen Elizabeth II had developed particular expertise in using dessert selections to influence the emotional atmosphere of diplomatic gatherings. Traditional British puddings created feelings of warmth and nostalgia that often softened positions on contentious issues. International desserts honored visiting dignitaries while demonstrating royal appreciation for their cultures. The psychological impact of these carefully chosen final courses often proved decisive in achieving diplomatic breakthroughs during difficult negotiations. The presentation style of each dish carried additional layers of meaning within royal communication protocols. Formal French service indicated the highest levels of diplomatic respect and was reserved for the most important state visits. Family-style service suggested more casual, friendly relationships and was employed when the royal family wished to create atmospheres of intimacy and trust. The choice between these presentation methods could influence the entire tone of diplomatic discussions. The royal china and crystal selection process involved similar considerations, with different sets chosen to convey specific messages about the importance and nature of each occasion. The finest pieces were reserved for visits by heads of state from major allied nations, while slightly less formal selections indicated appropriate respect for smaller countries or less critical diplomatic relationships. These subtle distinctions were noted by experienced diplomats who understood their significance within the broader context of international relations. The historical evolution of royal menu communication could be traced through centuries of diplomatic dining records maintained in palace archives. Medieval monarchs had employed food choices to demonstrate wealth and power, while Renaissance rulers had used exotic ingredients to display their global reach and cultural sophistication. The modern royal family had inherited these traditions while adapting them to contemporary diplomatic requirements and international sensibilities. The integration of Commonwealth ingredients into royal menus served multiple communication purposes, demonstrating ongoing relationships with former colonial territories while supporting economic development in these regions. When the Queen chose to feature ingredients from Jamaica, Canada, Australia, or other Commonwealth nations, she was making political statements about Britain's continued engagement with its historical partners while promoting trade relationships that benefited all parties involved. The accommodation of dietary restrictions and religious requirements presented complex challenges for royal menu communication systems. Islamic guests required halal preparations, Jewish visitors needed kosher options, and various cultural traditions involved specific food taboos that had to be respected while maintaining the integrity of the communication system. The palace culinary staff had developed remarkable expertise in creating meals that honored these requirements while preserving the symbolic meanings essential to diplomatic protocol. The seasonal timing of ingredients carried additional significance within royal dining communications. Spring vegetables suggested new beginnings and fresh opportunities for international cooperation. Summer fruits implied abundance and prosperity. Autumn harvests conveyed messages about maturity and successful cultivation of relationships. Winter preparations indicated endurance and the ability to weather difficult periods in international affairs. The bread service at royal dinners involved particularly ancient communication traditions that connected modern diplomatic practices with historical customs stretching back to medieval times. The breaking of bread together symbolized trust and friendship across cultures, while the sharing of specific types of bread conveyed messages about the depth and nature of relationships being celebrated or negotiated during these gatherings. Prince Charles had introduced innovative elements to royal menu communications, incorporating organic and sustainable ingredients that reflected his environmental concerns while sending messages about Britain's commitment to addressing global climate challenges. These menu choices demonstrated how traditional diplomatic protocols could evolve to address contemporary international issues while maintaining their essential communication functions. The temperature at which foods were served carried subtle but important meanings within royal protocol systems. Hot dishes indicated urgency and immediate attention to diplomatic matters. Room temperature preparations suggested measured consideration and careful deliberation. Cold presentations implied the need for patience and extended reflection before reaching conclusions about complex international issues. The portion sizes served to different guests could communicate relative importance and standing within diplomatic hierarchies, though these distinctions were implemented with such subtlety that they rarely caused offense while still conveying intended messages to those trained to recognize their significance. The royal staff had perfected techniques for managing these communications without creating obvious inequalities that might disrupt the harmony of diplomatic gatherings. The use of traditional British cooking methods versus international preparation techniques provided additional opportunities for culinary communication. When dishes were prepared using historical English techniques, they emphasized continuity and tradition in British approaches to international relations. When international methods were employed, they demonstrated openness to foreign influences and willingness to adapt British practices to accommodate global perspectives. The inclusion of regional specialties from different parts of the United Kingdom served to reinforce messages about national unity while demonstrating the diversity and richness of British culinary traditions. These choices were particularly important when hosting visitors from Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland, as they demonstrated royal appreciation for the distinct contributions of each constituent nation within the United Kingdom. The coordination required to implement these sophisticated menu communication systems involved extensive collaboration between palace staff, government officials, and international protocol experts. The successful execution of state dinners required months of planning and preparation, with every detail carefully considered for its potential diplomatic implications and communication value. The psychological impact of these culinary communications often exceeded their practical significance, creating emotional connections between international leaders that facilitated cooperation on issues far beyond the immediate subjects of dinner conversation. The shared experience of carefully orchestrated meals created bonds that enhanced Britain's diplomatic effectiveness in subsequent negotiations and international forums. The positioning and arrangement of royal family members during state dinners represented one of the most politically sensitive aspects of diplomatic protocol, with seating decisions carrying implications that extended far beyond simple etiquette considerations. The careful orchestration of these arrangements required extensive consultation between palace officials, foreign ministry advisors, and international protocol experts who understood the complex web of relationships, sensitivities, and strategic objectives that influenced every placement decision. Sir Reginald Worthington, the palace's chief protocol advisor for state functions, possessed an almost supernatural ability to navigate the intricate requirements of diplomatic seating arrangements. His 37 years of experience had taught him to balance competing demands from multiple international delegations while ensuring that British interests remained properly represented and protected. The successful management of these arrangements often determined the success or failure of entire diplomatic initiatives. The historical precedents for royal seating arrangements stretched back to medieval court practices where the proximity to the monarch indicated levels of favor, trust, and political influence. The evolution of these traditions through centuries of international diplomacy had created sophisticated systems that could accommodate modern democratic sensibilities while maintaining the essential hierarchical elements necessary for effective royal protocol. The Queen's own position at state dinners remained fixed at the head of the main table, but her choice of immediate companions carried enormous significance for international observers who understood the implications of royal proximity. When she placed a visiting head of state to her immediate right, it indicated the highest levels of British respect and suggested strong bilateral relationships. Alternative arrangements conveyed more nuanced messages about the current state of diplomatic relations. The Prince of Wales occupied positions that reflected both his status as heir apparent and his specific role in advancing British diplomatic objectives during particular visits. His placement near visiting royalty or heads of state indicated British interest in developing relationships that would extend beyond the current reign into future generations. His conversations during these strategic placements often laid groundwork for agreements that would not be formally announced until months or years later. The Duchess of Cornwall's participation in state dinner arrangements provided additional opportunities for sophisticated diplomatic communication. Her background as a commoner who had married into the royal family made her particularly effective in creating comfortable atmospheres for visiting leaders who might feel intimidated by the formal aspects of royal protocol. Her strategic placement could help ease tensions and facilitate more natural conversations between international delegates. The rotation of royal family members through different seating positions during multi-day state visits allowed for comprehensive coverage of all important international relationships while ensuring that no visiting delegation felt neglected or undervalued. This systematic approach to diplomatic engagement maximized the monarchy's effectiveness in advancing British interests across multiple simultaneous international relationships. The integration of British government officials into royal seating arrangements required careful coordination between palace protocol staff and civil service advisors who understood the specific policy objectives underlying each diplomatic engagement. Foreign secretaries, defense ministers, and trade officials were positioned to facilitate conversations that could advance particular British initiatives while maintaining the social atmosphere essential to successful royal entertainment. The psychological dynamics of royal dining arrangements influenced international relationships in ways that extended far beyond the immediate effects of dinner conversation. Foreign leaders who received favorable treatment during royal visits often developed personal attachments to Britain that influenced their decision-making processes for years afterward. These emotional connections represented valuable diplomatic assets that could be activated during future international crises or negotiations. The accommodation of international protocol requirements within British royal dining arrangements presented complex challenges that required extensive advance planning and consultation with visiting delegations. Different cultures possessed varying expectations about precedence, honor, and appropriate behavior during formal meals, and the palace staff had developed remarkable expertise in creating arrangements that satisfied these diverse requirements while maintaining British sovereignty over the proceedings. The management of potential conflicts between visiting dignitaries required sophisticated understanding of international relationships and historical grievances that might influence dinner conversation. Palace staff researched extensively to identify potential sources of tension and developed seating arrangements that minimized opportunities for uncomfortable encounters while maximizing possibilities for positive diplomatic developments. The use of multiple dining rooms during large state visits allowed for additional flexibility in managing complex international relationships. Secondary dinners could accommodate visiting officials who required attention but whose presence at the main state dinner might create diplomatic complications. This approach enabled the royal family to honor all important visitors while maintaining appropriate focus on the most critical diplomatic relationships. The training of royal family members in the subtleties of diplomatic seating protocol began at early ages and continued throughout their careers in public service. The complexity of these arrangements required deep understanding of international politics, cultural sensitivities, and historical relationships that influenced contemporary diplomatic dynamics. Young royals learned to navigate these complexities through years of observation and gradual increased responsibility. The documentation of seating arrangements for state dinners provided valuable historical records that revealed the evolution of British international relationships over decades of royal hospitality. Researchers studying diplomatic history often found these records more revealing than formal government communications, as they reflected the true nature of relationships between Britain and other nations during specific historical periods. The coordination between royal household staff and security services added additional layers of complexity to state dinner arrangements. Protection officers needed to ensure adequate coverage for all visiting dignitaries while maintaining the relaxed atmosphere essential to successful diplomatic entertainment. The integration of security requirements with protocol necessities required extensive advance planning and careful coordination between multiple government agencies. The economic implications of royal seating arrangements extended beyond immediate diplomatic benefits to encompass long-term trade relationships and investment opportunities. Foreign leaders who enjoyed positive experiences during royal visits often became advocates for increased economic cooperation with Britain, leading to significant commercial benefits that justified the considerable expenses associated with state entertainment. The media management aspects of royal dining arrangements required careful consideration of how seating decisions would be interpreted by international press coverage. Photographers and journalists analyzed these arrangements for insights into British diplomatic priorities and international relationships, making it essential for palace staff to consider public relations implications alongside substantive diplomatic objectives. The evolution of royal dining protocol to accommodate modern democratic sensibilities while maintaining traditional monarchical dignity represented one of the most significant challenges facing contemporary palace management. The successful adaptation of centuries-old traditions to contemporary international expectations required continuous innovation and flexibility while preserving the essential elements that made royal protocol effective in advancing British interests. The regional variations in royal dining arrangements reflected the diverse nature of the modern Commonwealth and Britain's global relationships. Dinners honoring African leaders incorporated different elements than those celebrating European allies, while visits from Asian dignitaries required additional considerations related to cultural traditions and religious practices that influenced appropriate hospitality approaches. The legacy effects of successful royal dining arrangements often became apparent years after the initial visits, when international relationships established during these social occasions proved crucial in addressing global challenges or advancing British objectives in international forums. The investment in these diplomatic relationships through careful attention to protocol details generated returns that far exceeded their immediate costs. The conclusion of royal state dinners involved elaborate ceremonies that served multiple diplomatic and symbolic purposes while providing final opportunities for wordless communications that could influence the lasting impact of international visits. The careful orchestration of these concluding moments often determined whether diplomatic initiatives would succeed or fail, making them among the most critical aspects of royal protocol management. The Queen's departure signal represented the most significant communication moment of any state dinner, as her method of leaving the dining room conveyed powerful messages about her assessment of the evening's diplomatic progress and her intentions regarding future relationships with visiting dignitaries. When she rose slowly and moved deliberately toward the exit, it indicated satisfaction with the proceedings and positive expectations for continued cooperation. More rapid departures suggested diplomatic disappointments that might require additional attention from government officials. The presentation of gifts during dinner conclusions followed traditions that stretched back centuries while accommodating modern diplomatic requirements and international gift exchange protocols. The selection, timing, and manner of gift presentation provided additional opportunities for wordless communication that could reinforce positive messages or subtly indicate areas where improvements in bilateral relationships might be necessary. Lady Catherine Pembroke, the Queen's principal lady-in-waiting for ceremonial occasions, had mastered the intricate timing required to coordinate royal departures with ongoing diplomatic conversations and security requirements. Her ability to read the Queen's intentions through subtle signals enabled seamless transitions from formal dining to private consultations or subsequent entertainment without disrupting the careful atmosphere that had been cultivated throughout the evening. The process of escorting visiting dignitaries from the dining room involved multiple levels of protocol that reinforced messages about the relative importance of different international relationships and Britain's assessment of various diplomatic priorities. The selection of royal family members to accompany specific guests provided final opportunities to communicate British intentions and expectations regarding future cooperation and collaboration. The documentation of dinner conclusions provided valuable intelligence for British diplomatic services, as the behavior and responses of international visitors during these final moments often revealed their true feelings about proposals discussed during the meal and their likely approaches to subsequent negotiations. Palace staff trained in observation techniques recorded subtle details that informed future British diplomatic strategies. The integration of modern security requirements with traditional departure ceremonies required sophisticated coordination between protection officers, palace staff, and international security details that accompanied visiting dignitaries. The successful management of these complex arrangements while maintaining the dignity and effectiveness of royal protocol represented a significant ongoing challenge for contemporary palace operations. The timing of post-dinner activities influenced the psychological impact of state visits, as international guests carried their final impressions from these events into subsequent diplomatic engagements. When the royal family arranged for extended conversations or additional entertainment following formal dinners, they were investing in relationship-building activities that often proved crucial during future international negotiations. The Queen's personal notes following state dinners provided insights into her assessment of visiting leaders and her recommendations for future British approaches to specific international relationships. These confidential communications to government officials influenced foreign policy decisions and diplomatic strategies in ways that remained invisible to public observation while significantly impacting Britain's international effectiveness. The historical analysis of royal dinner conclusions revealed patterns that illuminated the evolution of British diplomatic priorities over decades of international engagement. Researchers studying these patterns found correlations between the ceremonial treatment of different nations during state visits and subsequent developments in trade relationships, military cooperation, and cultural exchanges that demonstrated the practical effectiveness of royal protocol in advancing national interests. The training of palace staff in managing dinner conclusions required years of experience and careful mentorship from senior officials who understood the subtle implications of various ceremonial choices and communication techniques. The institutional knowledge required to execute these protocols effectively represented valuable assets that contributed significantly to Britain's diplomatic capabilities and international reputation. The psychological preparation of visiting dignitaries for dinner conclusions involved careful attention to cultural expectations and personal preferences that influenced their receptivity to final communications and ceremonial gestures. palace staff researched extensively to ensure that concluding moments would reinforce positive impressions while respecting international customs and avoiding potential sources of misunderstanding or offense. The coordination between royal protocol and government policy objectives required ongoing consultation between palace officials and civil service advisors who understood the specific diplomatic goals underlying each state visit. The successful alignment of ceremonial activities with substantive policy initiatives often determined whether international engagements would produce concrete results or merely symbolic achievements. The economic implications of successful dinner conclusions extended far beyond immediate diplomatic benefits to encompass long-term investment relationships and trade opportunities that generated significant returns on the considerable expenses associated with state entertainment. Foreign leaders who departed royal events with positive impressions often became advocates for increased economic cooperation that justified the investment in elaborate hospitality. The media management challenges associated with dinner conclusions required careful consideration of how departing international guests would characterize their experiences to global press coverage. The final impressions carried away from royal events influenced international perceptions of Britain and affected the country's soft power capabilities in subsequent diplomatic engagements around the world. The adaptation of traditional conclusion ceremonies to accommodate contemporary international expectations while preserving their essential communication functions represented an ongoing challenge for palace officials responsible for maintaining the effectiveness of royal protocol. The successful modernization of these traditions required continuous innovation and flexibility while protecting the core elements that made royal ceremonies valuable diplomatic tools. The regional variations in conclusion ceremonies reflected Britain's diverse international relationships and the need to accommodate different cultural approaches to ceremonial leave-taking. Dinners honoring Commonwealth leaders concluded differently than those celebrating European allies, while visits from Asian or African dignitaries required additional considerations related to traditional customs and religious practices. The legacy effects of successful dinner conclusions often became apparent months or years later when international relationships established during these social occasions proved crucial in addressing global challenges or advancing British objectives in international forums. The emotional connections created through careful attention to ceremonial details generated diplomatic dividends that far exceeded their immediate costs while enhancing Britain's ability to influence international affairs. The future evolution of royal dining protocol faces challenges from changing international expectations, technological developments, and evolving security requirements that will necessitate continued adaptation while preserving the essential elements that make these traditions effective instruments of British diplomacy. The ongoing refinement of wordless communication systems ensures that the monarchy will continue to serve as a valuable asset in advancing British interests on the global stage. The enduring significance of royal dining indicators lies not merely in their historical tradition, but in their continued effectiveness as sophisticated tools for international communication that enable Britain to navigate complex global relationships with grace, subtlety, and diplomatic success that reinforces the nation's position as a leading power in contemporary international affairs.